You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Elsie Escobar is a pioneering podcaster, a yoga teacher, and a social media mastermind. Please welcome Elsie to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you. We've known each other for, as you mentioned right before we started recording, like over a decade.
I know.
But it's great to talk to you. And we know each other through podcasting, and we're going to get to that. But I want to start in the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I was born in El Salvador, in San Salvador, Central America. Mm-hmm. I was there till I was about 9 years old, and then I moved to the United States, landed in the land of the angels, and I lived in LA basically for most of my life, and then I kind of left to go to grad school in the late 1990s, came back to LA, did a little bit of acting, and then moved to the East Coast, actually, in like mid 20, to 2017. Oh, we haven't even gotten there yet.
You're moving in the future. That's amazing.
I know, I'm moving in the future. 2007. And I kind of haven't gone back actually to the West Coast. So,
yeah. Now, you mentioned that you did a little acting, but were you creative as a kid? Like, what kind of creative pursuits were you exploring as a kid?
Gosh, I think the creativity that I explored as a kid was all in my head. It never actually came out of my body because I was incredibly shy. Like, I did not want to do much of anything. Like, most of the games, I was too afraid to even sort of be part of a game with anybody else. I loved reading books and having all of the ideas and the creativity inside my head, mm-hmm. which was, kind of where it lived for quite a long time. I think that if I would have possibly been raised in a different type of environment or, because being an immigrant, when you're like 9 years old and then trying to figure out a new language and you have to work so hard. And I didn't really kind of like step into anything that was remotely interesting to me for quite a while regarding creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. Were your parents creative at all, or anybody in your family creative?
My dad is actually, my dad's an architect, and mm-hmm. In El Salvador, his designs were amazing because it's like, I guess, everything back then was done by hand, and his writing right now always blows me away because it's like amazing writing, and everything he did was done by hand. Every, picture that he drew, all of that stuff was just so lovely. So he was more of a designer. He came up with all the ideas, in terms of architecture. My little brother's also a big. You should have him on the show. You should definitely have him on the show. He's been working for The Simpsons since like he was basically out of high school.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so he's been with The Simpsons now. I mean, still. And so what is he now? How old am I? He's like almost 3 decades, maybe 25, over 2 decades, definitely.
Yeah.
25 years or so. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I know.
So it sounds like even though you kind of thought you weren't expressing creativity, you had creativity around you, at least.
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I think it was all in my head. It is one of those things where you conjure up dreams and ideas inside of your head. And that's kind of how I lived a lot of my life, where it was like, I will make up my own life in my own head, and this is how I would do it. And I think I went into acting because I would embody, I had this like real emphatic way of feeling things, and really embodying characters and their emotions and pretending to be other people and stuff like that really took shape as a mistake. Like when I went into high school, I had chosen French to be my, how do you say it? Whenever somebody has a choice of something to take, I forgot what those used to be.
Like an elective?
Yeah, the electives. That's it. So it was an elective about, it was French is what I wanted. And then you have other choices in case you can't get in. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know. And I chose drama to be one of them, or theater, whatever it was called. And it ended up that I got put into that class. And that class, like, I mean, I was a really good girl. Like, I was like the one that showed up to class. I would never think of doing anything wrong, but that class gave me such anxiety that I wanted to not go to that class, to like, oh my gosh, I want to cut class, right? I was like, oh my God. For me, it was a horrific thought. But my teacher was incredibly supportive, and it turns out I had a skill that I didn't know. So, yeah.
Were you doing just scenes, or did you actually do plays while you were in high school?
I did plays, and then I also competed in those competitions. I don't know if you know that there was, like, in high school you do these competitions, like you do solo, like, monologues competitions and like scenes, and then you would go to the different universities as a high school student, and then there's a lot of high schools that would show up, and then you would just go and sort of, it was like it's sort of like you're auditioning. Like, that's what it morphed. Later on in my career, I recognized that this process is sort of like auditioning. You go into a room, you do your thing, you leave, right?
Right.
And so when you do like these things, a lot of the time, that's what you would have to do. You started off, you go into a room, you sort of do your monologue, and then you kind of like get in the finalists or whatever, and then you have to do it again, and then sometimes you do it in front of the other participants, and then you sort of win. And I won a couple of those competitions for most versatile performance, actually, because I played my favorite things to do was any of the absurdist theater. So I did Brecht. He did like a short play. It was called The Beggar or the Dead Dog, and I played the beggar. So I was a blind male beggar. And the lead role, one of the lead roles that I had in high school that I was really proud of, that I really loved doing, was 1984, and I played O'Brien. So I always played. I went against, I guess, what my physical appearance would be. That was like my favorite thing, was to play the character roles, and something that required a little bit more than being the lead woman. Like, I really did not like that. That didn't resonate with me too much.
And did you seek like those parts out? Like, was it your choice to do those, or were they having auditions and you got assigned that?
I got assigned that because I think what happened is I had the chops to pull them off.
Yeah.
And, and it was one of those things like, she's really good at it, we'll give her this. And I really reveled in being the one that could do it. And I really didn't want to be, because they're so boring. The women, like straight women, like straight lead, like the leading lady roles are very boring. There's nothing in there, at least when I was in high school. And that's how I got into the university, into grad school. I went to a university. Oh, actually, at that time, it was one of the only master's programs in the country that was chartered by Congress. So it was not part of a university. It was called the National Theater Conservatory in Denver, and it was part of the DCTC, which is the Denver Theater Company. Mm-hmm. And basically, there were eight people accepted annually per year, 3 women and 5 men, and I was one of those 8. But our class ended up losing 1 man, so it was actually 7 of us. It was 3 women and 4 guys that we ended up together for 3 years. And it was an incredible learning. The versatility got me in. What I started to learn, and what was a really challenge, is that the world of the arts really doesn't want you to go against type, and especially in Hollywood. So once I got into Hollywood, I was incredibly disappointed, because even when I was in grad school, I was given the opportunity to express myself and to try out and do different types of characters that went against type. Whereas when I was in Hollywood and auditioning for roles, I was only sent out for my type. It was it's just like, you are this Latina woman.
Yeah.
And that's about the extent of it. Like another Jennifer Lopez, when I was auditioning, Jennifer Lopez was just barely starting to be something, Mm-hmm. So it's like a Jennifer Lopez type, that was I was like, really? Again? So
I can do so much more. Why?
I know. And it was so frustrating. So,
Well, what was because you just, going through the school in Denver would just be so, I'm sure, so intense and so amazing. And then was it when you got out of that, you were like, well, got to go to Hollywood and try to make it? Or because I don't know, I think, when you get to that point, you kind of have the choice of Hollywood or New York, to do theater stuff.
Yeah. So what I did is like we had this incredible team. I mean, my classmates are amazing. They're actually doing quite well in theater, the majority of them. And what was the challenging part is that I chose to come back to LA because I was from LA. So I had
Hmm.
the opportunity. We went out and we did like a showcase, and most of us all got agents just from our showcase that we went out. So I was one of the lucky ones that actually arrived in LA with an agent and a manager once I just came. I was like basically all set. And I made my decision solely because I had been away from my family for 3 years because I was in Denver and they were here, and why not?
Right.
Not come back. And so I kind of made a personal choice. Whereas if I would have just followed my own, I guess, dream, or not dream, but I guess my own selfish desires, I probably would have ended up in New York. So I made decisions that were based on other people. And sometimes I'm sad about that. But it didn't really work out as well. And it was challenging because again, like I said, it was really hard to not have anybody see me beyond the way that I look,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was very hard for me.
Yeah. Well, so let's we can come back to acting a little bit, but I know a big part of you is yoga. And when did
Yes.
the interest in yoga start?
It started after the defeat of the acting process. Oh my God. No, because, and I think that's what ended up happening at that time. It wasn't as a big thing, the whole actor/yoga teacher serving tables thing wasn't really a thing when I was doing it. So, but it started because of that. I was really in a dark place. Like, I'm a super happy person. I'm naturally just happy. I don't really have I don't know, that's my propensity. But the whole defeat thing of like getting no's in my face, and it wasn't even the no's, it was the amount of energy that I put out and then not even hearing back was killing me. It was like out into the ether and it disappeared into nothing, and I was like, what happened? Like, wow, like there's no nothing, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I ended up just, serving tables and working out, and I discovered yoga because it actually was one of our training things inside of the theater. And for my MFA program, we were required to take yoga twice a week. It was a very subtle type of yoga. It wasn't like full on, but I remember that it made me feel comfortable whenever I used a lot of what we learned in class before I went on stage as a way to warm up before I went on stage. And I thought, oh, I really need to go back to that. And I kind of really, really fell in love with that. At that moment, it provided an escape for what I was feeling. And then I just started teaching like crazy.
Yeah. And this segues kind of perfectly into podcasting because you were one of the pioneering, I'm going to say female podcasters, because I'm not that you have to have that label, but just at the beginning it was mostly men, and you were one of the first women podcasting that I recognized and came across, and you really jumped in as sort of, I would imagine, like the first yoga podcast.
Yeah, I think I'm one of, if not the first audio yoga podcast, that was kind of done the way that I did it, because I was one of the only people at that time that were recording their classes and putting them online that was a woman,
Right.
There were a couple of people who were doing video stuff, and there was a couple of other guys that had classes online, but I just happened to do it because I just kind of fell in love with the medium. And I started to figure out that what yoga teaching and then podcasting, what it gave me is it gave me my stage.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can have my own stage. I can do my own thing, and it became a creative outlet for me. First, at taking the seat of the teacher and being really animated and not having classes like everybody else had, and being able to basically do a performance in front of everybody every time. So it wasn't like it was my personality that got people into the class, and I kind of followed that. It was that kind of presence. I got my own stage. And then when I found the whole podcasting thing, I thought, wow, well, this is another opportunity. And that showed me how powerful the just the voices and how much you can really do with just your voice to inspire people. And I also got to know all you guys, and I was very inspired by the majority of the LA podcasters because they had their own state. It was sort of like, oh my God, this is what I've been dreaming about. People just doing their own stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, with no like, network or movie studio or whatever saying, oh, you have to do this. Yeah.
Exactly. And, again, and I know that I keep coming back to this, but it's my voice. So you're not looking at me. You're not having preconceived notions of what you see and what I'm capable of. So I was able to have that move out of the equation. And I thought, how great that I have people that are choosing to listen to me based on what I have to say.
Yeah.
Whoa. For a woman, it's a little bit harder sometimes because, still as society is such that lots of women are, you just look at a woman and you immediately like make judgments on her in some way or other, positive or negative. But the voice itself has a different way, of getting to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how many years did you do Elsie's Yoga podcast?
It's still out there, but I stopped producing consistently probably about 3 years ago. And I have over 100 classes that are still free out there. And of course, the first ones with the horrible audio quality, which I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was just like, here, I'll just put this together. I had no clue. And so, but they're still out there. People are still, it's like I get a ton of, I've hit now almost 5 million downloads for that podcast.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of evergreen content because anybody can take a yoga class,
Exactly. It is. And I think it's something I didn't even know. I set myself up for success without even knowing it. It's evergreen content. I was there from the beginning. I have really easy keywords like Elsie's yoga class is like the name. So there's, I didn't try to be fancy or anything like that. It really was just like, I don't know what to name this thing. Well, it's my class here. Let's just put it like this. And so I didn't have, and so I kind of did all kinds of really things right without ever having any kind of strategy behind it.
Yeah.
And so it's still doing it, it's really great, but I love the medium so much I had to do more, as you know.
Yes. Yeah, well, I wanted to ask because, you may not be producing Elsie's yoga class anymore, but you have this amazing SheShe Podcast project, and I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, SheShe Podcast just basically came about because there were, I'm a proponent of women's voices in podcasting, and I love to hear more women's voices out there, and I'm sick of people saying that there aren't any, because there are. It's just that the majority of the attention doesn't go to us because there's only a few that pop into your mind, whenever you say something. So we thought, one of my co-hosts, Jessica Kupferman, actually started a Facebook group, and she called it like Women Who Podcast or something like that. And I was like, genius. I've been wanting to do this forever, and then I immediately started to grab every woman podcaster that I knew because I knew a lot of people, and she was like, whoa, what's going on here? And as I started to add people, they were like, is there a podcast for women that are podcasters? And Jess and I kind of we were like, we need to do this like right now.
Yeah.
And within 3 days, we had a name, a website, and we recorded like the next 4 episodes. Because we kind of knew what we were doing. And then it's kind of taken a life of its own. We're still producing. We launched that in 2014. Now there's almost 5,000 women in the group. It's incredible. It's amazing. The community is vibrant. It's positive. It's empowering for everybody. And Jess and I just have a good time behind the mic. You do learn a few things about the podcasting industry, particularly from the women's point of view. We have a different perspective than the majority podcast out there. Plus, we tinker with about 8,000 other things that are going on in our lives, and we keep it very interesting. So it's not just, how to podcast.
Yeah. Well, and as we're kind of wrapping up here, the one other thing I wanted to ask you about is you work for Libsyn, which is an amazing podcast hosting company. And I recommend it to, for a long time, I was somebody who just, for Dr. Floyd, I just kept all the files on the FTP, our own FTP server, like our own server. And now finding Libsyn, I'm a little late to the party, but slowly moving everything over there, and it's great. And you are, I'm blanking on the title you have.
The podcast happiness expert is what I call myself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's your title. I feel that's your title. But you are sort of the outward face of the company, and you handle all the social media stuff, the Facebook, the Twitter, the Google Plus, everywhere else. And what I kind of wanted to ask was, that's your job is going through there and answering, and you can get all those things on your phone. Right. So you can always kind of look. Do you feel like you ever have to take a break, or are you always looking at the Libsyns? Like, do you have specific hours? You're like, I'm only going to do this between, 8 and 5, or are you always looking at the Libsyn social media stuff?
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard question. I think if I were a proper employee, meaning I will go to the office and do my job,
right?
I think for the most part I would probably do certain hours. But since I'm a remote, like I work remotely, then I'm constantly attached to my phone, and it's to a fault. The only time that I really don't answer is when it's like really late at night or something like that, because I do not want to have people come to expect that.
Right.
And that kind of stuff. But I am kind of on all the time. And I think that as a manager of a social media, of social media, you kind of have to do that. And because I have found that in order to manage particularly the voice of and of help, of being, to responding and being attentive, there's nothing like getting an answer within like minutes.
Yeah.
To change somebody's mind versus, to the next day.
Right.
So I've kind of taken.
If you look at some people's, some big corporations, Twitter feeds, and they haven't posted anything in 10 days, and it was just a promotional thing, you can get. But it's like, I think if somebody looks at Libsyn, they go, oh wow, this company's really responsive.
Yeah, and I think that that's really what it is. And I actually, the other thing too is that I really enjoy podcasters. Like, I'm not sure that I would be this like into it if I was running the Bank of America social media. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I would just be like, I don't know what to talk about here, guys.
Yeah.
But with podcasters, I'm already doing this. I'm already so passionate about the latest news and information and conversations. Like, what are you guys doing? And like, well, did you see this new tool? Or wow, this is really cool. Like, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for me to engage, and there's nothing worse than having your podcast not go right, or you having trouble uploading something, or not understanding how to do something and you're stuck. Like, I've been there, so I understand I understand.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. So I think when you hear that from us, it's kind of what I want. I want you to understand we get it. We understand. We're doing our best to help you out whenever there's an issue. And then we also want our podcasters not to feel so sad about stuff like stats and things, so that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's why you're the happiness expert.
Exactly. I want to make you happy about podcasting.
Well, Elsie, if people wanted to check all the things you do out online, where can they go?
If you want to go into YoGeek, you can follow me at YoGeek or check out what I'm doing there. Almost in most social media, and that's YoGeek. And if you want to listen to me, SheShe Podcast is a really fun podcast. We do keep it interesting. It's never the same. And also the feed, the official Libsyn podcast, which I also produce and put out there. And that was it's a little different. It's got a little bit more stats, a little bit more industry news in that one. But I personally think it's one of the best podcasts about podcasting out there. And it gives me time to be kind of creative. Both of these kind of ideas and things like that help me stay with my own stage.
And your own voice.
In my own voice. Yeah.
Well, I will put links to all those things in the show notes. And Elsie, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. Yay.
Elsie Escobar was today's guest on 15 Minutes With. If you'd like to follow Elsie on Twitter or just about any other social media platform, her username is Yogeek. That's YOGEEK. For links to her other projects and podcasts, check out the show notes for this episode over at GrantCast.com. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wabshall, Twitter user Buttsinggear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Moreno, Reed Loveland, Ivan Asquith, Vanessa Whitney, Nancy McCarthy, and Janine Lee. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. And while you're over there on iTunes, be sure to click that subscribe button. That way you'll get new episodes the moment they're released. If you have feedback for the show, you can send it to me directly at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you very much for tuning in. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.SaturdayMorningMedia.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.